room, completely paranoid, and ran down, bursting out laughing, and went back to the hotel, to the one room that we were staying at. It was a hotel called the Crest Hotel in King's Cross, which no longer exists. It's been pulled down, but we went back there. And of course, the band knew immediately that we'd smoked, and we got ostracised and told we were going to be kicked out of the band, right, which we completely laughed about and went and celebrated and went to a club and got shit-faced drunk, because we thought the gall of the band, thinking that they could throw us out of the band. And we always used to have breakfast around the corner. We used to go around there, and they used to have fresh orange juice, and we went round there, and we'd always go there because after a hard night's drinking, it's good to have a bit of orange juice. So we went round there, and we were in one table, and the band was on the other table, and they wouldn't speak to us because we'd smoked dope, and we were still stoned. You know, we were still stoned. And anyway, eventually, what happened was a member of the band came over and said, well, you know, it's okay, we'll let you go this time and we'll let you back into the band. And it was just a funny thing, you know.
Despite continued singles success, over the next 2 years, the cracks began to show. A very public drugs bust resulted in unwanted press attention, and the light naivety of the Valentines' early image became tainted.
Bon and I started talking about it, you know, we're going nowhere. We tried it out for 6 months, but we just, you know, we were only being kept alive by publicity about pot, not by what we were doing, which was good, but we weren't playing at the right places, and, you know, we got lost, basically. And so we got together, Bon and I, and decided that, and we felt we had the right to do it because we formed the band in the first place, that we would leave the band, and that we'd get on with our other things. And, you know, we announced it to the band. It didn't go down all that well, obviously, with them or with our management at that stage. But we felt it was for the best.
Whereas Lovegrove moved into music journalism, Bon continued his dream for stardom and joined Fraternity, a heavyweight hippie group modelled on Robbie Robertson's The Band.
Bon had found his niche. You know, that was what he needed, and Bon was what they needed because he was a front man, and he became, when he left us, he became a showman. He learnt from us, from the Valentines, and no question about that. He'd had, you know, virtually, you know, 10 years being a showman up front, and he was what they needed as well. He was a front man with a good voice.
This is the only surviving footage of a documentary Lovegrove produced on Fraternity in 1972.
They believed that they were the best band in the world. They were, again, going to conquer the world. And it was also a time of many magic mushrooms being dropped and lots of alcohol being drunk. And that became part of Fraternity as well, without a doubt. And they were pretty heady times.
Fraternity aspired to that thing that the band had, you know, the band that backed Bob Dylan. You know, they had the big pink up at Woodstock. Well, Fraternity got their own little house in the hills, and they, as far as I can tell, sat around, got stoned and jammed, and that's like about it. They made a few sort of half-assed records in terms of, you know, they cobbled them together and sort of got them out, and they had this kind of cult reputation, but really they had some potential which was kind of squandered by being in Adelaide and whatever, and then they went to the UK, and that's where, you know, they were lost, and they completely lost it, and it just fizzled out.
Bon's first trip to England in 1972 was a disaster. Fraternity failed to grab the attention of the British public, and it would prove fatal to the band.
It was a pretty hard experience, I think, for every member of that band. Bon had just got married to Irene, so the whole band, including the dog, and all the wives, it's just this wastrel hippie tribe, and that was just infighting in a small house and going, and just seeing that it's not going to land in your lap. You know, you can land in the UK and you're not going to be Jethro Tull overnight.
Bon returned to Australia broke. A second band had fallen apart, and he began drinking heavily. He became a makeshift member of the Mount Lofty Rangers, if only to pass the time until a more appropriate band appeared. Yet danger loomed on the horizon.
It was during a rehearsal one night that Bon got really drunk after having an argument with a member of the band. I think it was actually the old bass player of fraternity. I could be wrong on that one. Got very drunk and used to drink a lot of brandy straight from the bottle, and decided to get on his Harley motorbike and scream off to see someone. He was in a really foul mood. I mean, the thing about Bon was, as anybody who knows him well, is he could turn very quickly. He could turn into a really bad mood, an aggressive mood. Anyway, he ripped off on his Harley-Davidson bike into the darkness of the night. And later on that night, and the night went on, later on that night, around about midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, I got a phone call from Irene, his wife, saying, "Vince, can you come and pick me up? Bon's been in an accident, he's nearly dead."
Despite several injuries, Bon Scott survived. During his long recovery, he stayed with Vincent Lovegrove, who is now working as a booker for clubs in Adelaide.
Bon was recovering from this motorcycle accident he'd had early in 1974, almost killed, a terrible accident. And it was through the recovery period, because he was in hospital for a long time. I used to like to compare this to Bob Dylan's motorcycle accidents, a bit like that. Bon was reflecting on what's he going to do with his life. Fraternity had broken up, his marriage had broken up. He was leaning on Irene, his wife, a bit, and there was a bit of feeling there. But he just knew that he had to do something.
At that stage, I was booking a very young band from Sydney called AC/DC. I used to book AC/DC a lot, mainly because their mentor and big brother, George, who Bon and I had befriended during our Valentine's days when they were in the Easy Beats. And George and I remained, I wouldn't say friends, but certainly acquaintances. One time, after they'd been down 4 or 5 times, George gave me a call and said, what happened to the money that the boys got last time? They didn't get any. And I said, well, I gave it to their manager. And he said, well, listen, do me a favour, he's going to get the sack. Next time they're over, give it to Malcolm. He's the man you give the cash to now. And he said, by the way, do you know any singers around? Because we're going to sack the singer as well.
Vince could think of only one suitable replacement, and Bon Scott's years in the wilderness would soon be at an end. Vince took Bon to see the young band at a gig in Adelaide.
I was enthusiastic. I really wanted him to get in the band. I was really enthusiastic. We were out the front looking at the band, and I said, what do you think? They're great, aren't they? And he said, well, they're all right, but, they're only kids, they're a bit young, aren't they? And I said, yeah, but, just listen, they really rock. They've got that Chuck Berry thing, and they've got that Stones thing, they're going to do it. He said, oh, yeah, I think they'll do it. But he said, I'm just not sure, would they have anything to have any common ground? He said, I've got a bit more experience than they have. I said, OK, well, let's go back and meet them. And I went back and we met them. And prior to that, I'd mentioned to them, I was backstage and mentioned to them and said, they said, well, come on, Vince, have you got a singer? And I said, yeah, what about Bon? And they said, oh, he's a bit old, isn't he? And I said, mate, he'll rock the arse off you guys. Make no mistake about that. And they said, oh, yeah. I mean, Malcolm and Angus were kids then, as, I wasn't much older, but the reality is that I knew it'd fit. I knew it'd fit. And so they went back that night to the house of the bass player of fraternity in his basement, and they jammed and they did, Chuck Berry songs, and they did just 12-bar rock and roll songs, and they gelled. And they were up all night. The next day, Bon came in, packed his bag, and I said, where are you going? He said, I'm going to Sydney. And I said, what are you going up there to live? And he said, no, I'm joining the band.
Bon returned to Sydney with the band, and while they waited for an appropriate time to sack Dave Evans, he got to know the various members well.
Bon was a funny guy. He's very cheeky, always laughing, always joking, live wire, nice bloke. Yeah, he was fun to have around, Bon.
Evans's days were numbered, And it was at the Hotel Esplanade in Melbourne that the final confrontation occurred.
Yeah, the last gig at the Esplanade Hotel in St Kilda was difficult. I knew we were having the meeting that night. I'd almost decided that I was going to split with the band anyway. I'd had enough at that stage. And I spent that afternoon with two friends of mine who were trying to talk me out of leaving the band. We did the gig. No one really spoke to each other. I wasn't speaking to the roadies. It was pretty solemn, to tell you the truth, except when we were on stage, of course. We did our act as we always do. That's being professional. But yeah, the air was thick and heavy, I can tell you. And then after the gig, we just went back to the hotel and it was all over, for me.
My feeling with AC/DC and the whole frontman scenario at the time